The emergency beacon cut through the void of space like a knife through silence. Its automated message repeated endlessly, broadcasting on every known frequency across the galaxy. The signal originated from the Kepler 442 system, where the peaceful Zephyrian civilization had thrived for over 2,000 years. Captain Vextar of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet watched helplessly as the massive Vorthan warships surrounded their homeworld. His own vessel, the Time's Peaceful Dawn, was barely half the size of the smallest enemy cruiser. The Zephyrians had always been a gentle species, focusing their technology on exploration, art, and sustainable living rather than warfare. "Sir, the enemy fleet is demanding our immediate surrender," reported Communications Officer Yelana, her blue-scaled hands trembling as she worked the console. "They're giving us 1 standard hour to respond." Vextar's elongated head drooped slightly. The Vorthans were known throughout the galaxy as merciless conquerors. They stripped worlds of their resources and enslaved populations for labor in their massive industrial complexes. Once they controlled a system, no civilization had ever successfully fought back. "Have any of our allies responded to our distress calls?" Vextar asked, though he already suspected the answer. "The Altarian Republic sent their regrets, sir. They say they cannot risk war with the Vorthan Empire. The Centauri Federation has gone silent completely. Even the Andromedan Council has declared this a local matter and refuses to intervene." The captain's heart sank. 3 billion Zephyrians lived on the surface below, along with countless other species who had made their world home over the centuries. Artists, scientists, philosophers, and farmers who had never harmed anyone now faced enslavement or worse. "Sir," Yelana called out suddenly, her voice filled with confusion. "I'm detecting something unusual in the outer system. Multiple energy signatures approaching at incredible speed." "Vorthan reinforcements?" Vextar asked grimly. "No, sir. These signatures are different. The energy patterns don't match any known civilization in our databases. And sir, there are a lot of them." On the main view screen, space itself seemed to tear open, as dozens of ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. But these weren't the smooth, organic curves typical of most galactic civilizations. These vessels were angular, aggressive-looking, bristling with weapon systems and armor plating. They moved with a predatory grace that made even Vextar's peaceful nature recognize them as born for war. The lead ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of the largest Vorthan dreadnought. Along its hull, strange symbols were painted in stark white letters: Terran Federation, UFS Retribution, Unknown Vessels. "This is Admiral Kozlov of the Terran First Fleet," came a voice over the communications channel. The translation systems struggled with the alien language, but the tone was unmistakably confident. "We received your distress beacon. Please identify yourselves and your situation." Vextar looked at his crew in amazement. He had never heard of the Terran Federation, but they had come in response to the emergency call, when no one else would. "This is Captain Vextar of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet," he replied. "Our world is under siege by the Vorthan Empire. They demand our surrender and plan to enslave our population. We have no military capable of resistance." There was a pause before the human admiral responded. "Captain, I need you to move your vessels to a safe distance. We're going to handle this situation." Cropped, before Vextar could ask what they meant, the Vorthan fleet commander's voice boomed across all channels. "Unknown ships, you will withdraw immediately or be destroyed. This system is now claimed by the Vorthan Empire. Your interference will not be tolerated." The human response was swift and cold. "Negative. We don't negotiate with slavers. You have 30 minutes to withdraw from this system. This is your only warning." The Vorthan commander's laugh was like grinding metal. "You dare threaten us? We are the Vorthan Empire. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. Who are you to stand against us?" "We're humans," Admiral Kozlov replied simply. "And we're very good at breaking things." The Vorthan fleet, numbering nearly 300 ships, began moving toward the human vessels. Admiral Vextar watched in horror, certain he was about to witness the destruction of the only force willing to help his people. The humans were outnumbered more than 3-1, but then something extraordinary happened. The human fleet didn't retreat or try to negotiate. Instead, they formed a battle line and accelerated toward the enemy at full speed. Their ships launched clouds of small, fast-moving objects that Vextar's sensors couldn't quite identify. "What are those projectiles?" asked his tactical officer. "I don't know," Vextar admitted. "Their technology is completely unknown to our databases." The first Vorthan ships opened fire with their massive plasma cannons, energy beams capable of cutting through the hull of any known starship. But something impossible happened. The human vessels didn't just absorb the hits. They seemed to shrug them off entirely. Their shields flared and held, completely unaffected by weapons that should have vaporized them. Then the humans returned fire. The difference was immediate and devastating. Where Vorthan weapons fired single, massive energy beams, the human ships unleashed storms of destruction. Thousands of kinetic projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed, particle beams, missile swarms, and energy weapons of completely unknown design, all struck the Vorthan fleet simultaneously. The first wave of enemy ships simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed in the conventional sense of exploding or burning. They were reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma and debris. The humans had somehow weaponized physics itself. "Impossible," whispered Vextar's tactical officer. "Those ships were shielded with Vorthan military-grade defenses. Nothing should be able to penetrate them that easily." The Vorthan fleet tried to regroup, but the humans pressed their advantage relentlessly. Their ships moved with a coordination that suggested either incredible training or artificial intelligence assistance. They flanked, divided, and systematically annihilated Vorthan forces with a precision that was almost artistic. What shocked Vextar most wasn't just their military power, it was their tactics. The humans didn't fight like any civilization he knew. Most galactic conflicts involved formal declarations, rules of engagement, and attempts to minimize casualties, even among enemies. The humans fought like they were conducting pest control. "Sir," Yelena called out, her voice filled with awe. "The Vorthan command ship is trying to retreat." The massive Vorthan dreadnought, a vessel that had personally overseen the conquest of dozens of worlds, was attempting to flee the battlefield. But the human ships were faster. 3 sleek destroyers intercepted the retreating command vessel, and within moments it joined the growing debris field that had once been the pride of the Vorthan military. In less than 20 minutes, the entire Vorthan invasion force had been completely eliminated. Not a single enemy vessel escaped. The humans hadn't just won, they had achieved total, overwhelming victory against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for generations. Admiral Kozlov's voice came over the communications again. "Captain Vextar, the immediate threat has been neutralized. Are there any wounded who require medical assistance?" Vextar stared at the view screen where the human fleet hung in space like sleeping predators. "Admiral, how is this possible? The Vorthan Empire has never been defeated. They have the most powerful military in known space." "Had," the human corrected gently. "And Captain, there's something you should know about humans. We've been fighting wars since before we discovered fire. It's what we do best. The Vorthans may have conquered 1,000 worlds, but they never met a species that evolved from persistence hunters on a death world." The words meant little to Vextar, but the tone was unmistakable. These humans weren't just warriors. They were something far more dangerous. They were a species that had turned warfare into an art form. "Why did you help us?" Vextar asked. "You don't even know our people." "Because someone needed help," Admiral Kozlov replied. "And because slavery is something humans have very strong opinions about. We've been on both sides of it, Captain, and we've learned that freedom is worth fighting for." As the human fleet began spreading throughout the system, conducting what they called cleanup operations, Vextar realized that the galaxy had just changed forever. The Vorthans weren't just defeated, they were erased. And somewhere in the darkness of space, a species called humanity had announced their presence in the most definitive way possible. The emergency beacon still broadcast its desperate plea across the stars. But now it carried a different message entirely. Help had arrived, and it carried the flag of a people who turned impossible odds into inevitable victories. The peaceful Zephyrians were safe, But Vextar couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy itself would never be quite the same. Humanity had arrived, and they brought with them the kind of warfare that turned legends into dust. 3 days after the battle, Captain Vextar stood in the cargo bay of the human flagship Times, UFS Retribution *, staring at technology that challenged everything he thought he knew about physics. Admiral Kozlov, a surprisingly ordinary-looking being with short gray hair and kind eyes, walked beside him, explaining their weapons systems with casual ease. "This is our primary kinetic penetrator," Kozlov said, gesturing to a rod that seemed to be made of impossibly dense metal. "We accelerate these to about 15% of light speed using magnetic coils. At that velocity, they don't just penetrate shields, they ignore them completely." Vextar's translator struggled with some of the technical terms, but the implications were clear. "Admiral, our scientists calculate that such acceleration would require power output exceeding most planetary reactors." "Probably." Kozlov shrugged. "Humans tend to over-engineer things. We've found that having too much power is rarely a problem, while having too little power is often fatal." They walked past rows of weapons that seemed designed by minds that understood destruction on a fundamental level. Plasma cannons that burned hotter than stellar cores, missile systems that could track targets through dimensional folds, and defensive screens that apparently worked by convincing incoming energy that it didn't really want to hit the ship. "Admiral," Vextar ventured carefully, "may I ask how long your species has been spacefaring?" "Oh, about 200 years, Kozlov replied casually. "We're still pretty new to all this interstellar stuff." Vextar stopped walking entirely. 200 years? But your technology is centuries ahead of anything in our databases. The Vorthans have been expanding for over a millennium. Time isn't always the key factor, Kozlov explained patiently. Humans come from what we call a death world. Everything on Earth was constantly trying to kill us, so we got very good at killing it back. Then we started killing each other, which taught us even more creative ways to break things. By the time we reached space, warfare was as natural to us as breathing. But surely you must be a peaceful people now that you've advanced so far? Admiral Kozlov's laugh was dry. "Captain, 3 months ago we finished a civil war that lasted 30 years. Last week, 2 of our colony systems got into a shooting match over mining rights. Humans don't really do peaceful. We do controlled violence and directed aggression. It's why we're so good at protecting other people." As they toured the ship, Vextar began to understand why the human vessels looked so different from other starships. Every corridor could become a choke point. Every room had multiple exit routes. Even the civilian areas were designed with combat in mind. These people didn't just build warships. They built floating fortresses operated by a crew that treated warfare like a science. "Sir," came a voice over the ship's communication system. "We're receiving priority transmissions from multiple sources. Put them through," Kozlov replied. The first message came from the Altarian Republic. "To the unknown fleet in the Kepler 442 system, we congratulate you on your victory, and would like to open diplomatic relations immediately. The Altarian Republic has always been a friend to powerful military forces." Vextar's scales flushed with embarrassment. 3 days ago, these same Altarians had refused to help his people, claiming they couldn't risk conflict with the Vorthans. The second message was from the Centauri Federation. "Greetings, noble warriors. The Centauri Federation wishes to discuss mutual defense treaties and technology-sharing agreements at your earliest convenience." How quickly they changed their tune, Kozlov observed dryly. "I suppose that's politics everywhere." But the third message was different. It came from deep space, on a frequency that made every sensor on the ship scream warnings. The voice was mechanical, cold, and spoke in the ancient Vorthan imperial language. "Human fleet, you have interfered with the expansion of the Vorthan Empire. This action cannot be overlooked. Prepare for the consequences of your aggression." Admiral Kozlov studied the message with interest rather than fear. "Well, that's interesting. I thought we got all of them." "Sir," called the ship's tactical officer, "we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout this region of space. It appears the Vorthans have a much larger fleet than we initially believed." Through the view screen, Space began to shimmer as ships dropped out of hyperspace. Not dozens this time, hundreds. Massive dreadnoughts, each one larger than the entire human fleet combined. Behind them came support vessels, troop transports, and siege platforms designed to crack planets open like nuts. "By the 7 moons," whispered Vextar. "That's the Vorthan Imperial Armada. No one has ever seen so many of their ships in one place." "How many?" asked Kozlov calmly. "Our sensors count over 800 vessels, sir. Some of them are larger than our space stations." The human admiral nodded thoughtfully. "That's definitely more than we brought." "Communications. Send a message to Terra Command. Tell them we need reinforcements." "How long will that take?" Vextar asked desperately. "Oh, they're already here," Kozlov replied with a slight smile. "Humans are paranoid. We never send one fleet when we can send 3. Space tore open again as more human vessels arrived. These weren't ships, they were mobile cities bristling with weapons. Carriers disgorged clouds of fighter craft that moved like schools of mechanical fish. Battleships that made the times, retribution times, look like a escort vessel, took position alongside vessels that Vextar couldn't even classify. "This is Admiral Chen of the Second Fleet," came a new voice. "Sorry we're late to the party. Traffic was murder in the Sol system." "And Admiral Okafor, Third Fleet," added another voice with a distinctly cheerful tone. "We brought the heavy equipment." The Vorthan Imperial commander's response boomed across all frequencies. "Impossible. No civilization possesses such a fleet. Your vessels will be destroyed and your species will be enslaved for daring to challenge the Empire." Yeah, Admiral Chen replied with obvious boredom. "You guys really need new material." Same speech every time. Admiral Kozlov activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is a standard anti-slavery operation. Rules of engagement are simple. Anything that shoots at innocent civilians gets recycled into scrap metal. Let's show these gentlemen why you don't mess with human-protected space." What followed wasn't a battle. It was an education. The human fleets moved like components of a single, vast organism, each group supporting the others in ways that suggested countless hours of training together. They didn't just fight the Vorthan Armada. They dismantled it systematically. The Vorthans had numbers and size. The humans had something far more dangerous. They had experience fighting opponents who outnumbered them. Every tactic the Imperial forces tried had been faced and defeated by humans fighting other humans. Every weapon they deployed was countered by defenses that had been tested in wars against beings who understood human psychology. "Captain Vextar," Admiral Kozlov said as explosions lit up the space around them, "would you like to know the real reason we're so effective?" "Please," Vextar replied, unable to look away from the systematic destruction of the most feared military force in the galaxy. Most species develop spaceflight and then learn to fight wars in space. Humans perfected warfare first, then brought those skills to space. We've been fighting each other for so long that fighting aliens is almost relaxing by comparison. At least you folks are straightforward about wanting to kill us." A Vorthan super dreadnought, a vessel that could have conquered entire systems single-handedly, became a brief new star as human weapons found its reactor core. The explosion was so massive it lit up 3 planets in the system. "We're getting surrender requests from multiple Vorthan vessels," reported the communications officer. "Standard terms," Kozlov replied. "Complete disarmament, repatriation of all slaves, and a promise to never bother anyone again." "Oh. And we'll be keeping their ships as compensation for travel expenses." Vextar watched in amazement as the legendary Vorthan Imperial Armada, the force that had terrorized the galaxy for generations, simply ceased to exist as an effective military unit. Ships that didn't surrender were destroyed. Ships that did surrender were boarded by human marines, who seemed to view armed Vorthan warriors as minor inconveniences. "Admiral," Vextar asked quietly, "what happens now? With the Vorthans defeated, who will maintain order in this region of space?" Admiral Kozlov looked at him seriously. "Captain, humans have a saying. With great power comes great responsibility. We didn't come here looking for an empire. We came here because people needed help. But now that we're here, He gestured at the growing fleet of surrendered Vorthan vessels. Well, someone needs to make sure this doesn't happen again. As the last of the Imperial vessels either surrendered or joined the expanding debris field, Vex-Tar realized that the galaxy had just witnessed the birth of a new power. The humans hadn't just defeated the Vorthans, they had absorbed their military assets and effectively inherited their territory. But unlike their predecessors, these humans seemed more interested in protection than conquest. Their ships were already deploying humanitarian aid to former Vorthan slave worlds. Their engineers were offering technical assistance to civilizations that had been strip-mined by the Empire. "Welcome to the new age," Admiral Kozlov said quietly. "Let's hope we do better than the last guys." 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, Captain Vex-Tar found himself serving as a liaison officer aboard the newly constructed human starbase Times Haven Station **. What he discovered there challenged every assumption he'd made about these remarkable warriors who had saved his people. The station orbited the former Vorthan capital world, now renamed Freedom's Gate, where millions of liberated slaves from dozens of species were beginning new lives. But the humans hadn't simply destroyed and abandoned. They had built something entirely new. "Captain Vex-Tar, you're just in time," called Dr. Sarah Martinez as she approached through the station's central promenade. The human scientist led the Galactic Rehabilitation Project, an initiative that was helping former slave worlds rebuild their civilizations. "What am I just in time for, Doctor?" Vex-Tar asked, still marveling at how the humans had transformed a military stronghold into something resembling a peaceful city among the stars. "The celebration," she replied with excitement. "The Corvan delegation just announced that their homeworld's ecosystem is fully restored. 3 months ahead of schedule." Vex-Tar followed her to the observation deck, where representatives from dozens of species mingled freely. The scene would have been impossible under Vorthan rule. Beings who had once been enslaved or terrorized now worked together as equals. At the center of it all, human engineers and scientists moved between groups, offering advice and assistance with the casual competence he'd come to associate with their species. "Doctor, may I ask you something?" Vex-Tar said as they watched a group of young Corvan engineers explaining their atmospheric processors to fascinated human technicians. "Of course. Your people are incredibly effective warriors. Perhaps the most dangerous military force the galaxy has ever seen. Yet everywhere I look, I see you building, healing, protecting. Why do you choose peace when you could easily take whatever you wanted?" "Doctor," Martinez smiled, the expression both sad and proud. "Captain, that's exactly why we choose peace. We know what we're capable of when we choose war. We've lived with the consequences of our own violence for thousands of years." She gestured toward a memorial wall displaying images of human conflicts throughout their history. "We fought wars that killed hundreds of millions of our own people. We created weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We've been both victims and perpetrators of slavery, genocide, and every other horror imaginable. When you've seen what unchecked power can do, you become very careful about how you use it." A commotion near the docking bay caught their attention. Admiral Kozlov was greeting a delegation of Altarian officials who had arrived with what appeared to be a formal diplomatic escort. The same Altarians who had refused to help the Zephyrians were now seeking human protection for their own colonies. "Admiral," the lead Altarian diplomat said formally, "the Republic wishes to negotiate a mutual defense pact. Our intelligence suggests that the hegemony of Sector may be planning aggressive expansion into this sector." Kozlov listened patiently before responding. "Ambassador, we're certainly willing to discuss protection arrangements, but there will be conditions." "What sort of conditions?" "Complete abolition of your indentured servitude programs, equal rights for all species within your territory, and open borders for refugees from oppressive regimes." The Altarian diplomat's expression soured. "Admiral, you ask us to fundamentally change our entire social structure." "No," Kozlov replied calmly. "I'm asking you to stop treating sentient beings as property. If that's too fundamental a change for your society, then we probably aren't compatible allies." Vex-Tar watched in fascination as the most powerful military force in the galaxy casually dismissed potential allies because of ethical concerns. The humans weren't just strong, They were principled in ways that most civilizations couldn't afford to be. "Captain," Dr. Martinez said quietly, "would you like to see what we're really proud of?" She led him to a secure section of the station where human scientists worked alongside researchers from dozens of species. The laboratory was filled with technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics. But the projects themselves were focused entirely on creation rather than destruction. "This is our terraforming initiative," she explained, showing him a holographic display of a dead world, slowly coming back to life. "We're using modified Vorthan strip mining equipment to restore planets they devastated. What once destroyed now heals." In another section, human doctors worked with alien biologists to cure diseases that had plagued various species for centuries. Medical techniques developed to keep human soldiers alive in impossible conditions were being adapted to save civilian populations across the galaxy. "And this," Dr. Martinez said with obvious pride, "is our greatest achievement." The final lab contained what appeared to be a collection of children from multiple species, all working together on various projects under the guidance of human and alien teachers. Young Zephyrians collaborated with former Vorthan slaves, building devices that none of their individual species could have created alone. "We call it the Integration Initiative," she explained. "Children from different worlds learning together, playing together, becoming friends. They'll grow up thinking cooperation between species is normal." "Doctor," Vextar said slowly, "you're not just rebuilding the galaxy. You're remaking it entirely." "Someone has to," she replied. "The old way obviously didn't work. The strong preyed on the weak. Civilizations isolated themselves, and everyone lived in fear. We figured there had to be a better approach." An alarm sounded throughout the station, not an emergency signal, but a general alert. Admiral Kozlov's voice came over the communication system. "All personnel, we're receiving a distress signal from the Rigel system. Unknown aggressors are attacking civilian shipping. Human Defense Fleet is responding immediately." Within minutes, Vextar found himself on the bridge of the Times, Retribution Times again, watching the human fleet deploy with the same terrifying efficiency he'd witnessed during the Vorthan conflict. But this time, he understood what he was seeing differently. "Admiral," he said as they entered hyperspace, "may I observe the operation?" "Of course. But Vextar, I want you to understand something. What you're about to see isn't humans being violent. It's humans being protective. There's a significant difference. The Rigel system was under attack by raiders calling themselves the Iron Syndicate. Pirates who had filled the power vacuum left by the Vorthan collapse. Their ships were attacking unarmed freighters, stealing cargo and capturing crews for slave markets that still operated in the darker corners of space. The human response was swift and overwhelming. The Iron Syndicate found themselves facing opponents who treated piracy as a personal insult. Ships that might have negotiated with other civilizations were simply destroyed without warning. Pirates who survived the initial assault were captured and processed with mechanical efficiency. But Vextar noticed something remarkable. The humans were simultaneously conducting rescue operations, providing medical aid to wounded civilians, and coordinating with local authorities to ensure the captured pirates faced justice under local law, rather than human military tribunals. "Why don't you simply execute them?" asked the Regalian system governor over the communication channel. "They are clearly guilty of piracy and murder." "Because we're not judges," Admiral Kozlov replied. "We're protectors. Our job is to stop the immediate threat and help you handle the aftermath according to your own laws and customs." After the operation, as they helped coordinate relief efforts for the attacked shipping lanes, Vextar finally understood what made humans so terrifyingly effective. They weren't just warriors. They were warriors with a cause. Every action was driven by principles they were willing to die for. "Admiral," he said as they watched human engineers helping to repair damaged freighters, "I believe I finally understand your species." "Oh? What's your conclusion?" "You're not conquerors pretending to be peacekeepers. You're peacekeepers who happen to be very good at war." "There's a difference," Kozlov smiled. "Took you long enough to figure that out?" "Yes. Humans are dangerous. We're probably the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever produced. But we're dangerous in defense of something, not in pursuit of it. That makes all the difference. As the Time's Retribution Times headed back to Haven Station, Vextar reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy that had once cowered under Vorthan rule was now protected by human fleets. Former enemies worked together on projects that benefited everyone. Children from dozens of worlds grew up thinking diversity was normal and cooperation was natural. The emergency beacon that had started everything still broadcasted occasionally. Not distress calls now, but messages of gratitude from worlds that had found something they'd never expected. Protectors who asked for nothing in return except the chance to make things better. "Admiral," Vextar said as they approached the station, "what happens when you've solved all the galaxy's problems? When there are no more tyrants to defeat or refugees to protect?" Admiral Kozlov laughed. "Captain, you've clearly never met humans before. We'll find new problems to solve. Probably start arguing among ourselves about the best way to help people. Then we'll form committees to study the arguments. Then we'll argue about the committees. And if someone threatens the peace you've built," the human's expression grew serious, "then they'll discover why we keep building bigger ships. The galaxy is under human protection now, Vextar. Anyone who wants to hurt innocent people will have to go through us first." As Haven Station grew larger in the view screen, its lights reflecting off the hulls of ships from dozens of worlds, Vextar realized that the emergency beacon had done more than summon help. It had announced the arrival of something the galaxy had never seen before, a species powerful enough to impose their will on anyone, yet wise enough to choose cooperation over domination. The universe was a safer place now, protected by beings who understood that true strength meant knowing when not to use it. And somewhere in the darkness of space, other species facing impossible odds could look up at the stars and know that if they called for help, humanity would answer.